in every decade, in every conflict, other forms of state terror emerge. Also, what Israeli army, what they did in Lebanon during Sabra and Shatila, and then the secret prisons, Khiam in the south, torturing men and women to death. So it goes through like a red line of the history of this state. And the interesting point is that many other terrorist groups learn from Israel.
This was Dr. Dieter Reinisch. The starting point for our discussion was Dieter's experience at the recent Palestine Congress in Berlin. As you will hear, this Congress was shut down under questionable pretext by a German state prosecutor who had the private venue raided by fully armed riot police. The apparent aim was to prevent prominent speakers like the former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis or the Palestinian surgeon Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita, who testified against Israel at the ICC earlier this year and who survived 2 Israeli attacks on the hospitals in Gaza where he worked in, from addressing the audience. The Congress in Berlin coincided with student protests across the US, which have resulted in intense crackdowns and political scrutiny, all coming in the wake of recent congressional hearings on anti-Semitism, where anti-Semitism is more often than not equated with legitimate critique on Israel's genocide in Gaza. House Speaker Mike Johnson even suggested calling in the National Guard. This, of course, is not the first time, and those old enough to remember know that the National Guard does not shy away from shooting at and killing students. Keyword: Kent State shootings if you want to check it out. The point here is that we are living in a time where speaking out, where carrying the wrong flag, where simply participating in an international congress can get you arrested or worse. This is why I took the opportunity to discuss media bias and state terrorism with Dieter too. Dieter has written a book about terror, and as journalist he has first-hand experience when it comes to media bias. This gives him considerably more credibility than most primetime news anchors out there who, in the interest of their careers, no longer dare to speak truth to power. Not so Dieter. Although the interview is Eurocentric, what you will hear is emblematic of our times and as such relevant wherever you live. I encourage you to watch the full interview, but I've included the timestamps for media bias and state terror below if you want to skip ahead. Okay, and now before we jump into the interview, a quick call to action. Some of the best interviews on this channel are shadow banned, which means YouTube is not presenting them to you, the viewer. Some examples are Noam Chomsky's interview about Israel, the interview with Tom Suarez, the author of Palestine Hijacked, the amazingly candid discussion with the US Ambassador Charles Freeman, or the interview with the former director of the Max Planck Institute, Wolfgang Streeck, to name just a few. So if you're interested in content that apparently you're not supposed to see, content that goes against the mainstream narrative, have a look at some of the previous interviews that we have recorded for your pleasure. And of course, it always helps to spread the news if you like and subscribe to this channel. Dieter Reinisch, thank you so much for joining on that short notice, because I think we came in contact the first time yesterday. This is great that you have the time today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You deserve it, absolutely. Yeah, and I will explain in a moment why. Yeah. Now, we had a brief chat just prior to me hitting the record button here, and I have a whole list of your academic and professional achievements in front of me. So I was puzzled. How is this possible? This young fellow has already such a string of achievement. Are you comfortable of telling us your age?
Yeah, sure I am. I'm 38, so I'm not that
Okay,
young anymore.
that explains. So once we're done, you have to tell me a secret, okay?
I will.
Good.
I will try.
Good. So you are a rare combination between academic and journalist, right? So maybe you elaborate a little bit.
Yes, I'm. I'm coming from the field of history, contemporary history. I studied history at the University of Vienna in Austria, and from the very beginning, I was very much interested in conflicts, international conflicts. Um, the Basque country, Kurdistan, Palestine, also conflicts in Latin America, and of course the Northern Irish conflict. And I guess I stuck to that conflict also because of language, because I could follow it more easily. I could read original material and literature. So I guess it was already 20 years ago I developed an interest in Irish history through the Northern Ireland conflict. Went to Ireland the first time, I think it was in 2004, 2005. And as I was studying um, history at the University of Vienna, I did an Erasmus exchange in Belfast. And I was always a historian who was not so much comfortable with sitting in the archives for weeks. I always wanted to go out and speak with people. So um, I conducted interviews. I'm using the method called oral history. So with participants of the events that I'm researching. My first research was I did interviews with women that were active in the armed struggle on the Republican side in the 1960s, 70s, and 1980s in Northern Ireland. And then I conducted a PhD research at the European University Institute in Florence. Again, I continued with my focus on Northern Irish history, contemporary history, and I did interviews with former IRA prisoners, so people that were imprisoned for IRA membership, so political prisoners. That was the topic of my PhD research. I later published it as a book with University of Toronto Press, and I was interested in what happens inside the prison and how does the relationship between the outside movement and the prisoners inside uh, work, the contact, and through that the role that the prisoners inside the prisons played during the peace process. And I also tried to compare it with other conflicts, South Africa, the role of prisoners there, with Nelson Mandela is a familiar name. And after my PhD, I worked at universities, and I was leading a research project at the University of Galway. And that was the time of Brexit, and Northern Ireland was in the news a lot because of you had the Northern Ireland Protocol, the debates between London and Brussels. What's going to happen with Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland remains or will be outside of the EU, while the rest of the island remains in the EU. Will there be a border, customs checks, and so on? So, and at that time I was always interested in writing, journalistic writing, and I started to write for newspapers, opinion pieces for Austrian newspapers, German newspapers, also Washington Post, Neue Züricher Zeitung in Switzerland. First opinion pieces about the situation in Ireland, the debates. Because of my research, also more and more regarding paramilitarism, the still existing so-called dissident Republican groups, but also loyalist groups that are still armed in Northern Ireland. And I got invited to radio programs on that topic. So over the years, I basically stumbled into journalism more and more, and um, it was basically at the same time that I got a bit um, frustrated with how academic research works and what input you actually have. Because I mean, you're studying for years, writing research papers for leading academic journals, and at the end of the day, almost no one reads them. So
If you get them published, number one,
if you get them
which is
published,
a challenge, then
that is a
hardly
challenge.
anyone. Yeah.
And also, as you said, because you mentioned it, if you get it published, also the whole peer review process. I I got more and more frustrated. I mean, that's a separate topic, but
Mm.
um, I more and more got into journalism, and now for yeah, I worked at University of Galway. I was leading this research project until last February. I was already more than part-time working in journalism, and now I'm working as a full-time journalist. I still teach at a university and supervise master students, so I still maintain my links into university and the academic landscape, but my focus nowadays is on journalism.
Mm. And how did you get interested in the Israel-Palestine conflict, in lack of a better term? Because I know you have a history there.
I actually I have a long history being interested in that conflict. I guess it was also through my parents. I'm coming from a Catholic family. My parents are very religious, but I call it uh, Catholicism. So peace movement. My father got politicized through the 68 movement, the students' protest at that time. So they were always interested in like yeah, peace movement, also liberation theology in Latin America and so on. And my father, he uh, visited Israel and Palestine several times in the 1980s, and he told us about that. And he visited Gaza, and he visited the refugee camp in North Gaza, Jabalia, and so on. And my parents with me and my sisters, I think it was winter 1996 1997 that we visited Palestine the first time. So and since then I maintained this interest in the region as a whole. Also in the last couple of years I visited Lebanon and also South Lebanon several times. I have friends there, and also my partner, my wife. That's a coincidence, but she also has an interest. She in the whole region. She visited the region several times. She's an anthropologist and wrote her PhD thesis on the Gulf states with a focus on art in Dubai. So yeah,
Mm.
we both
You
have a
confirm
great interest. Yeah.
you confirm what Gideon Levy told me. Gideon Levy is a very well-known journalist writing for the Haaretz in
Mhm.
Israel, and he said at the end of the interview, you as an advice to young people, come have a look, and if it's only for 2 3 days, come and have a look and you will see, right? So it's very hard for somebody who goes there with open eyes not to really realize as a human being,
Mhm.
yeah, what's really happening. So your journey is a confirmation of that statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I came across you because you were one of those journalists who went to a recent Palestinian conference in Berlin. This is the segue that I would like to use to going into our discussion. It was quite an interesting, how shall we call it, experience, probably. Yeah. So maybe you tell us what happened.
Yes, you're right. It was an interesting experience. I attended this conference as a journalist. I traveled to Berlin from Vienna on Friday morning. The
It was a
conference,
week ago, right? It was a week ago, right? Or was it last Friday? 4 days ago.
no, it was a week ago. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
10, 11
So,
days ago.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be held from the 12th to the 14th of April. But actually, yeah, as I will tell it, parts of the conference were only held on Friday, the 12th of April. So yes, I contacted the organizers of the conference and asked for media accreditation. That was for me really simple because first of all, people in the Palestine Solidarity Movement in Austria know me well. Um, and for instance, I was already involved, like as a school student in the early 2000s in the protests against the Iraq War. And so um, yeah, I can't. And the second reason was that I'm a correspondent for a German newspaper, which was the media partner of the conference. Junge Welt is the name of the newspaper. So yeah, I traveled to Berlin on a Friday morning, and the conference was organized. And I think this is also relevant regarding the reaction from both the German media and the German state. The conference was mainly organized by two organizations. One is called Jewish Voice for a Just Peace, and the second is called DiEM25. This is a new European-wide political party, and it's probably best known through Yanis Varoufakis. He's the
The
founder of
former,
the former Greek finance minister, and
yeah,
he's basically it's his new political project. I immediately went to the press conference, which was on Friday at 9:30 in the morning, straight from the airport by taxi. And the press conference was held in a small office of Latin American solidarity group in Wedding in North Berlin. And as I arrive in the street with the taxi, like it was already crowded with police cars, and there was a protest by pro-Israeli group with Israel flags uh, outside, so very close, just 50 meters from the entrance of the press conference. The press conference was completely crowded. It was filled. There was a lot of German media was there, so German public media like Radio Berlin-Brandenburg, RBB, ARD, Deutsche Welle, Deutschlandfunk, and several international news agencies from the Middle East, Turkish news agency, uh, the online medium New Arab, the Spanish newspaper Diario Red, Al Jazeera was there, of course. Also, Phoenix TV from Hong Kong. So huge interest. And uh, immediately after the statements of the two spokespersons, it turned hostile because the so-called Springer Presse, uh, so the publishers of the German tabloid Bild Zeitung and of Welt
it's a
news.
large conglomerate, right? They have, I don't know how many publications, right?
Yeah, I think it's a biggest European conglomerate, and uh, they very powerful, very influential, and they were starting a media campaign against the conference like already weeks before, and they were calling it anti-Semitic Congress, and they were calling for bans of the Congress and everything. And because of that reason, because the reporting of all the newspapers and media outlets of Springer Presse, the organizers said that they are not allowed. Also because the room, it was a small room, there was not enough space, and said everyone else but the Springer Press is allowed. And usually, I mean, the relationship between German public media and Springer Press is very hostile. But immediately, all the questions were, um, where is there censorship? Why is the Springer Presse not allowed? All the German media were defending the Springer Presse. And then it turned really like, I think, just to give an example how biased the German media in attendance were, they just asked Wieland Hoban, who is the spokesperson of Jewish Voice for a Just Peace. He's a musician, He's Jewish himself, and one journalist just asked him, "Are you an anti-Semite?" Just, just like that at the press conference. I mean, also from a media ethical standpoint and from uh, quality of reporting, I mean, you would never ask a question like that at a press conference. But I guess we speak a bit more about the media, but I just want to give you as example. Um, then they announced the venue of the conference at the press conference. I leave the press conference. It lasted for about an hour, and I witnessed already the first arrest of the police in Berlin because one member of the public or someone, a man, he had hoisted a Palestine flag on a fence opposite the building of the press conference, and they arrested him for hoisting a Palestine flag. That's how the day started. Then the conference was held in South Berlin near the former airport Tempelhof, and it was supposed to start at 2. So registration was from 12 noon until 2 p.m. And I arrived there again. Everything was like crowded with police. There was a lot of riot police. Later, the police spokesperson of Berlin, Beate Ostertag, told me that they had 900 police officers on duty on that day. 900, while the conference had sold 650 tickets. So there were more police officers on ticket than um, people part or people that were supposed to participate in the conference, because it was not possible for them to participate, for all of them to participate in the conference. So I arrived at the conference venue. It was still closed. There were several tactics from the police to disrupt the flow of the conference. For instance, they said they have to search the venue. They have to search with dogs for explosives and before anyone can enter, and that lasted for hours. So at 2 o'clock, when the conference was supposed to start, the police didn't let anyone in, and then it was a venue for 650 people, so a private hall. Um, and the police said no, for security reasons and fire security, only 250 are allowed in. Although it was, the authorities had registered for other events 650 there. So only 250 people. But the conference organizers had sold 650 tickets. So then the negotiation started. Who can go in first? The organizers, then others who were involved in the organizing, like those who provided the catering and groups that had information stalls there. Then the media, the accredited media, were allowed in, and basically that's it. That was almost 200 people. So very few of the ticket holders could enter the hall. I go in as registered media, and I enter the building. I go upstairs into the hall, and the hall is filled with armed police officers. And I was like, why? Why? This is a private venue. Why are there armed police officers inside the hall? And I was later told um, by one of the legal team of the conference that the police had declared the conference a demonstration inside the hall. Very, very strange. I've never heard anything like that before. I mean, it was a private hall. They had rented a private venue, and the police said no, that's not a conference. That is a demonstration inside a hall, and at demonstrations we have to participate. So we have to participate in this conference inside. There were about 50 police officers at least standing at every entrance, then several hundred outside. Um, and the conference organizers had also only allowed in registered media, which was mainly international media, some German media as well, but the vast majority of the German media were not registered by the conference organizers. They also said that it is because they didn't want live recording from inside the hall. For security reasons, they didn't want anyone from the audience to be recorded, and they couldn't guarantee that some of the TV stations will record the audience. What the police did, that they let all the German media in through a side entrance with the
The
same.
media, the media which was not accredited for the event. That's what I mean.
Exactly,
Mm.
without without the okay from the organizers. The police let them in through a side entrance. Again, with the same argument that at the demonstration, all media is allowed to attend and film. And since this is a demonstration inside the hall, they let them in. A very, very strange and conf- yeah, confused. At first, I didn't understand because was sitting in the middle. I was preparing my camera, and suddenly I see on the right-hand side that dozens of camera teams are let in by the police. Um, okay, that was that. The conference started very late. Definitely, I didn't check the time, but it definitely an hour or maybe almost 2 hours after it was scheduled to start. Um, Again, since the police said it was a demonstration, they demanded that the rules and regulations are read out in 3 languages, but they only provided the organizers with them just before the conference and only in German. But they demanded that they are read in Arabic as well. So they were first read in German, English, and then translated into Arabic. Then the police demanded no, the Arabic translation was not good enough. They have to do this again. So you see, all this harassment was going on. The police didn't want that this conference actually starts. That that it runs smoothly. The police also brought with them a state prosecutor who was sitting in a room downstairs and following the live stream, and who was prepared to stop the conference and also initiate charges during the conference. At the first session of the conference was about the history of Palestine. And the first speaker started. She's a Palestine journalist who lives in Berlin. Her name is Heb Jamal, and she gave a history of the Nakba and 1948. She was in the room, and then the second speaker was supposed to be Abu Sitte. So there is a father and son, Salman and Ghassan Abu Sitte. The father is a medical doctor and the president of the University of Glasgow. The son is a journalist. Both were supposed to attend the conference, but both were not allowed entry into Germany. They were stopped at the airport, and and one of them, the father, he's the current president of the University of Glasgow. He served for Doctors Without Borders in Gaza
In
for
Gaza,
in
yeah.
Gaza for 40 days, and he wanted to tell his experience.
Yeah, he
Um,
was he was sorry, he was twice in a hospital when the hospital was bombed by the Israelis. Twice.
Yes, yes,
It's quite
exactly.
remarkable. Yeah.
Yes, and he wanted to talk about his experience, and the German authorities stopped him at the airport, saying he has what they call a Betätigungsverbot, so that he's not allowed to uh, uh,
Perform any types of activities. Yeah.
yeah, any forms of activities. Yeah, it's not specified what that means, what the kind of activities, but it is not allowed to conduct any activities in Germany. So the Sun started. So they played a video recording of his speech, and it was about the history of Palestine. Yeah, and about 1 minute into the video recording, I was sitting in the middle, and I see on the right hand side that one police officer he waved to the others like that from the other side, and uh, the stage was surrounded by police, and uh, the electricity went off, the lights went off. So the police cut the electricity of the whole building to stop the live stream. They argued first. So first we didn't know what was happening. Yeah, we found out then that they cut electricity to stop the live stream because they argued that because he has this Betätigungsverbot, not conduct any activities in Germany, and through the live stream he's addressing a larger audience in Germany, and that would go against this so-called Betätigungsverbot. And they said that the police were not able to review the video beforehand. Um, there were negotiations, it was hectical, no one knew what's going on. It lasted for maybe half an hour, maybe an hour again. A lot of tension in the room, but everyone remained calm. And there were negotiations between the legal team of the conference organizers, and the police. The police were heavily armed. One should also say that those who stormed the conference, they were not police from Berlin. They were from North Rhine-Westphalia, from Duisburg.
Riot police, right? They were riot police.
They were riot police, yeah,
Yeah.
from Duisburg. Uh, from a police spokesperson, I heard on the day after also that they had riot police from Leipzig, from Saxony, there as well. And then um, the organizers were informed that the conference is banned, and that also any substitute events for the whole weekend are banned. So it was not possible to continue with the conference at another venue the next day. It was entirely banned for the whole weekend, or also all um, additional substitute events. And the police started to clear the hall. There was a bit of hassle and tension. They arrested two members of the audience. Both were Jews that were arrested at the conference, and they cleared the hall. Um, I was, I remained outside the hall for a bit longer, speaking with other colleagues, and then I get a phone call from someone I knew from a group. They're called Students of the Palestine Cause. They're a group. There was a group of about 10 of them coming from Vienna. I knew them from Vienna, and I get a phone call and said, "Dieter, can you come? We are on the way to the subway, and they're arresting us." So it was not far from the venue. I went there, and they had arrested two of these students. Um, they didn't give any reason. They let them go after half an hour, after they checked their ID and searched them. And we were a group of about 15 people, and we continued walking towards the subway Alt Tempelhof. And three police cars were just driving at slow pace next to us. And every couple of minutes, they grabbed one of the students, arrested them, um, checked their ID, searched them, and also Then the students went into the subway. The police followed them, also grabbed one. She's of Indian origin. She studies in Vienna. They took her out of the subway station. Again, held her, searched her. Um, they searched her for arms and ammunition. That was the reason they gave. The, um, I rang one of the legal team. He came and he could solve the situation. But you see, there was all this hassle and all this harassment going on for the whole day. So that was Friday. Um, on Saturday morning, the organizers held another press conference. Um, the registered media, those who were had an accreditation for the conference, were allowed in half an hour earlier. There was only one TV crew came then later. It was again RBB, Radio Berlin Brandenburg. It was, or at least that was visible on their microphone. It was also a very odd situation because they were they were constantly filming the other journalists until the organizer said, "Sorry, the the speakers of the press conference are sitting there in front of you. They're not in the audience. Why are you filming the other journalists all the time?" So that was also very odd behavior for journalists, that you're more interested in filming the other journalists who are there and not the press conference. Um, at the press conference, the 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 legal representative Nadia Samur spoke. Also, again, the two spokespersons of the conference, and then two who were uh, who were speakers of the conference, of the now banned conference. One was Dror Dayan, originally from Israel, a filmmaker who works at the University of Liverpool. And the organizers had also called for a conference against the banning of the conference. For them, pardon, for a demonstration against the banning of the conference in the afternoon outside the Rotes Rathaus, so the city hall in Berlin. And that was a big demonstration. That was really big. It was only called uh, after the banning of the conference the day before, and there were several thousand there. It was a loud and peaceful protests, all shades of political organizations, many left-wing organizations, socialist organizations, Trotskyist organizations, communist organizations, um, LGBT movement was there, groups like Queers for Palestine, and Arab participants. It was a loud and peaceful protest. Weather was good. Everything seemed fine. Also, some of the participants told me that that was by far the biggest protest in Berlin this year. And again, a very, very heavy police presence there. Um, Almost 1,000 police officers were on duty. So altogether, over the whole weekend, 2,500 police officers were on duty. And again, constantly they were breaking into the conference and arresting people. Arresting people. I couldn't see any reason. I spoke with several others. I spoke with journalist colleagues. We didn't see any reason because there were no symbols or flags of any prohibited organizations visible. Um, they just arrested people, and then at the very end of of the demonstration, they heavily stormed the demonstration. Um, there was some physical fights, and they arrested a young woman. And I followed them behind the police lines with my press card. With me were four other journalists. Two were working for a Turkish agency based in Berlin, and two Spanish colleagues who work for a TV station in Doha. And so we five are there, and they brought this young woman into. They have these arrest vans. These are the big gray vans with a prison cell inside. And suddenly we hear her screaming. Uh, and she was screaming, she was crying, she was crying that she can't breathe, she needs fresh air, and that took several minutes until they carried her out. And she was lying on the ground, and she was vomiting constantly, and she's crying, vomiting, crying that she can't breathe, that she and she felt she had a panic attack. She felt claustrophobic, and she was just lying there, and for 50 minutes or so, she was just constantly vomiting. Um, and we tried to document the situation, not for publication, of course, because of her privacy, but document it for her solicitor for later on. And my colleagues, they were very angrily, very aggressively stopped from filming, although the police had checked our press IDs before, and also that was the reason why we could also go behind the police lines. Um, the police were very aggressive. Um, we said, why is there no ambulance coming? I mean, at demonstrations, in particular, if there's such a large police court, you have like the police have their own first aid, their own medics with them. It took half an hour until she got first aid, until an ambulance arrived. Right, that was Friedrichstraße, so this is the center of Berlin. It took half an hour um, that that an ambulance arrived. No one gave her first aid. No police officer were giving her first aid. Um, the other journalists, my colleagues, they were asking like, who's the responsible police officer here? He was always busy. Seemingly, no one was responsible from their side. We complained and we asked for the PR department of the police. Eventually, actually, we were surprised, but the spokeswoman of the Berlin police eventually arrived. She gave us a statement, like it was basically not no real content. She was just defending everything. Although she was surprised herself when we told her that we were stopped from filming. She said that maybe because of the stressful situation that her colleague acted inappropriate or so. Yeah, but yeah, that was at the demonstration. Then we left the scene as soon as the ambulance arrived. It was already the end of the demonstration. People were leaving, but still police were continuing to arrest. At the time that we spoke with the police spokeswoman, she said 6 arrests were made. Afterwards, I saw 2 more. So there were at least 8, probably more arrests made on that day. But also the police um, spokesperson couldn't give us any reason why these arrests were made. Only one, she said it was an attempt stealing of a police camera. But she said, yeah, this is ongoing. She hasn't seen the reports. The final reports are written after the shift when the demonstration is over. So she didn't say anything. So yeah, that was Saturday, and then on Sunday I visited a protest camp. There was a small protest camp. There were about 50 tents of pro-Palestine activists that was opposite the German Bundestag, like on this large park opposite the Bundestag. Young people, students, all in their early 20s. There were about like 100 people there, I would say, at the time that I arrived at the protest camp. And they were also completely encircled. The park was completely encircled by heavily armed riot police. Um, it was all completely peaceful. They were camping there. They had 3 large banners facing the Bundestag. One said German media is German media kills. The second demanded a stop of arms deals and arms exports from Germany to Israel, because one of the main demands of the conference also was an arms embargo, because the conference organizers, they the title of the conference was "We Accuse." They accused Germany of complicity in the genocide, because 30% 30% of the arms and the ammunition used by Israel since 7 October are coming from Germany. And the third banner, the third demand, was an immediate ceasefire and an end to the genocide. What was also interesting in a very negative way, was that the um, again the police rules and regulations for this protest camp, because the police said that only English and German are allowed to be spoken at the camp. And the days before, they actually had arrested people for praying in Arab. When they did the evening prayers in Arabic, they arrested some worshippers for not speaking English or German at the camp.
Hmm.
And later, I also heard that happened the days after. They had arrested a group of Irish people at the camp for speaking Irish. um, so
Hmm.
yeah, so that was the weekend in Berlin, and to summarize, I I'm following political events. I attended various political manifestations, demonstrations, conferences, and so on in different countries, almost for 25 years now. Um, Also in Northern Ireland, in a post-war society where the police drives around in armored cars, yeah, still, but such an aggressive behavior over 3 days, um, constantly, I've never experienced before. Um,
That's a trend that we see internationally, right? The militarization of the police, the stifling of freedom of speech. Yeah,
yes,
it's everywhere. It's everywhere, and that
it,
brings us now. Yeah, please.
yeah. Maybe one point I want to add. Because I had mentioned who were the organizers of the conference: Jewish Voice for Just Peace and the European Party DiEM25. And also, if you look at the speakers, that was mainly the secular Palestinian nationalist milieu that was there. Yeah. Um, so very left wing pan Arabic movements were among the speakers. And on Friday evening, the day they banned the conference, Nancy Faeser, the German Interior Minister, she congratulated uh, the police for their swift and robust action against the conference, and also in her statement said it is very important that we keep a close eye on the Islamist scene in Berlin. So she's calling this conference, organized by Jewish groups, by secular groups, by left-wing organizations, the Islamist scene.
Hmm. Yeah, she's framing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and this is also a very worrying development,
Hmm.
and it's echoed by the media in Germany.
Yeah. And that brings us now to the media. Now, I have discussed why the West is supporting Israel on a number of occasions in my interviews, most recently with Wolfgang Streeck, who is the former
Mhm.
director of the Max Planck Institute, emeritus professor Michael Brenner, Noam Chomsky, etc., etc. So we don't need to discuss this here. Yeah? But what I'm interested in talking to you, because you are a journalist, is the apparent, the obvious, the hard to hide bias of the Western media, right? And there's one more element I would like to highlight. I mean, I know there are only two or three large news agencies left, which then dissipate, all the information that's basically synchronized. Yeah, sometimes the same words are used, right? So, from your experience, I mean, you probably see it from two sides. You see it from the side as a consumer, but then you, as a critical journalist, you probably hit the glass wall with some of your reportings, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, I see it from two sides, and I've experienced it also from yeah, I experience this media bias, and there's really um, and in particular in Germany and Austria. I don't know so much about the situation in the media in the Netherlands, but uh, in Germany and Austria, it's totally one-sided. And as I mentioned before, I, I I used to live in Ireland. In Ireland, it's completely different. Still, people complain about the public broadcaster RTE, but I mean, for me, following the German Austrian media, I mean, what RTE brings, this is super balanced, yeah. They regularly have reports from UN, from UNRWA, and so on, directly from Gaza, spokespersons. Um, in Germany and Austria, you have none of that, absolutely none of that. Um, the Austrian national broadcaster ORF, it basically only reports from Israel. They send two more correspondents to Israel. They have three in Israel who basically just summarize IDF press statements. And the ORF, they have one correspondent for the Arabic world, Karim El Gohari, who sits in Cairo. So he's responsible for the whole Arabic world, one person, and they have three in Israel. And Karim El Gohari, I remember very well the situation after 7th of October. He reported twice, and suddenly he disappeared. He disappeared for a week, and only constant correspond reports from the three correspondents from Israel. And Karim El Gohari was gone, and everyone was asking like, there is this tense situation at the checkpoint in Rafah. He is in Egypt. Where is he? Suddenly he emerged in Lebanon. They had sent him to Lebanon to report on the situation there. Uh, but very, very rarely he appears. And then I think one episode that was really like, I think that clearly sums up the behavior and the policy of the ORF. It was the day of the ground invasion to Gaza. Um, and Karim El Gohari is in the United Arab Emirates uh, reporting about a scientific project from an Austrian university of the redeveloping of the desert.
Very, very important, yeah, in that context.
It, yeah, and I think like ground invasion just starts, and they sent him to Dubai to report about the redeveloping of the desert, about the research project. They just wanted to have him away, um, and I know from colleagues also that some people were pushed aside. They don't, you know, also in Austria, like everywhere in the world, we have this problem also that the big media outlets, they rely more and more on freelancers. And some of the critical freelancers, they were just pushed aside. They don't get anything. They don't get any offers or anything since October anymore. And I experienced it myself. Like as I mentioned before, I've been to Lebanon several times. Since the first time I was there was in 2015, and since 2015 I returned, and I made contacts and made friends, and also made friends with Palestinians who live in Lebanon in refugee camps. And one of the contacts that I have, he's also now a friend of mine. He's a young lawyer. He's also listed as an official uh, lawyer of the to represent Palestine at the International Criminal Court. He always goes to Geneva and The Hague to defend Palestinians. And he lives in South Beirut in an area or in a refugee camp. I mean, in South Beirut, the refugee camps are not that visible anymore because they're just part of the city. And he's also a spokesperson of the Foreign Relations Department of a political organization in Palestine, the Democratic Front for Liberation of Palestine. And that, contrary to other Palestinian organizations, the DFLP is not listed as a terror organization in the EU. So they are a legal political organization within the EU. And he's one of their spokesperson, and he's a lawyer of the ICC. So I was asked by a German newspaper to conduct an interview with him uh, about how Palestinians and his organization in Lebanon view the situation. That was the week after October 7th. The interview was printed, and in my role as an academic, I had been invited to speak at the German Research Institute, the Zentrum für Zeitgeschichteforschung in Potsdam, so that's southwest of Berlin, and they had invited me to be the examiner and the discussant of a panel with one of their PhD students who works on Northern Ireland. And since that's my focus and I'm a German speaker, um, they had invited me. They had invited me in August, and the event was supposed to be held in November. So in mid-October, this interview is published in a German newspaper. And 2 days later, I get an email from the Research Institute uninviting me because they wrote that they don't find that in the current situation I'm the right person to come to their institute because of the interview I conducted with this Palestinian person. Um, and I replied that what the problem is with this interview. I mean, he's a lawyer. He's working at the ICC. Uh, he's part of a completely legal political organization. And they said, because I don't condemn the Hamas attack on October 7th. Well, I was the interviewer. I was asking the questions. And still they accused me of not condemning the attack. That was the reason why they uninvited me from speaking there. And also in my role as an academic with a focus on Northern Ireland, the whole event was supposed to be about German British relations during the Northern Ireland conflict. So nothing to do with Palestine at all, but still because I conducted an interview with a Palestinian, that was enough for them to cancel me.
That was the first days, weeks. Any interview about October the 7th started with the microphone under the nose. Do you condemn Hamas attacks? Yeah, I mean that's a classic
Yeah.
strategy when you address the proximate question as opposed to the ultimate question. The proximate question, the what, but not the why. Yeah, as if Guterres was critically, also extremely attacked by the Israeli ambassador for saying that October 7 did not happen in a vacuum. I mean, who cannot understand that 75 years of extremely brutal, oppression, occupation, and oppression, has to be considered for any events that take place in that area, right? But it was used as an argument, every single one. Any interview, Piers Morgan, everywhere. Do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We had one of these incidents, or it happened in Austria as well. Um, and I remember the Palestinian ambassador to Austria and the UN uh, headquarter in Vienna. Um, he was invited to a news program. It was I think it was Puls 4. That's the Austrian channel of the RTL RTL uh, group, and um, they invited him, and the whole interview was, do you condemn what happened on October 7th? Do you condemn what happened on October 7th? Um, and he just said, um, it's the first time that any Austrian news station invites me in 10 years, and the only thing that you ask me is to condemn my own people. I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
And when you say context, um, there was a journalist for the ORF, Fanny Stampf is her name, and she is doing short news interviews for social media for a young audience. And after October 7, um, she did a video which was perfectly fine because she was telling the whole story of of Gaza Strip from 1948. Who are the people who are there? Why are there refugee camps? And she said that some people, and she was quoting from UN reports, are calling it the biggest open air prison in the world. Um, and a day after, it was deleted from the internet and social media accounts of the ORF, and she was accused that the context was wrong. But she gave the context from 1948. But the argument from the ORF was that the supposed context she gave was wrong because the context is only October 7th. Of what happens now in Gaza, the context is only October 7th. Everything else is justification. The only context is the Hamas attack.
Yeah.
That's the context. That's the context of what's happening now, and
Yeah.
nothing before.
I saw again. I don't want to make this too much about Austria, but I believe it's symptomatic for the overall press, so we can take it as a, let's say, as a sample. Yeah. But I saw a panel that you participated in. If I have the names right, there was Eva Karaberg. She is the chief editor of the ORF, also the Austrian Public Television. There was a gentleman with the name of Gruber from MENA Watch, right? An Israel, a pro-Israel think tank, I would say. And that was you. There were three persons. Did I miss somebody? Three, yeah?
Yes, yes. Plus,
Gruber,
plus the moderator. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Plus the moderator, yeah. From an outsider, yeah, I found it, I mean, I don't even find the right word. Yeah. If you have a little bit of understanding of what's really going on, and you see this arrogant Mr. Gruber from MENA Watch, yeah, turning, how shall I say this, misrepresenting. I mean, it's more than just misrepresenting facts. Yeah, I mean, he talked about those 40 beheaded babies. Yeah, now there is just one example. Yeah, there is this organization indeed that he referred to. It's an Orthodox organization who collects bodies because they have to be buried uh, together as per Jewish faith. Yeah, but this organization, in the context of October 7, was highly, highly controversial because, first of all, the interviews between the leader of this organization and Netanyahu, where Netanyahu incentivizes them to foster his narrative. Yeah. But what's more interesting is the leader of this organization was actually interviewed, and I'm not sure by BBC or by CNN, one of those two, and he was asked because he was saying we have the evidence, I can show you. Yeah, he stood up, took his phone, showed it to the journalist, and the journalist says, Also, in all honesty, but I can't see any babies here. And then he said, well, on this picture, you can't see, you can't see the age. It could be a child, it could be someone from 19, 20 years old. Yeah. Also, this complete misrepresentation of facts. I mean, those 40 babies, which Joe Biden, the president of the United States, has repeated.
Mm.
I mean, the U.S. press, even CNN, had confirmed this was not true,
Yeah,
right? But it reminded me on the story in Iraq, sorry, in Kuwait. Yeah, remember the story where the daughter
mm,
of the ambassador claimed in front of the Congress, I believe, with crocodile tears,
yeah,
that the Iraqis took the babies out of the incubators, smashed them. I mean, in Serbia, same thing. Yeah, and people fall for it. Even, I mean, what means even? This senile old, I don't know, dinosaurs with the Cold War mentality, who sits in the White House, who hardly can walk anymore. It's not representative, but the global press picked it up
yeah,
in unison. Yeah, this and many other things. Yeah. Anyway, I just mentioned this because I immersed myself in interviews that you gave in preparation to our conversation here, and that stuck out for some reason because the moderator, she actually tried to be kind of objective. Yeah, but she had a hard time. She had a hard time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, it's this discussion. This it was organized by the Austrian Journalists Club, and it's also very difficult to argue with someone like this Alexander Gruber of MENA Watch, because he just says that um, I only use the information that I get from Israel because all the others are terrorists. So that's all. That's not
Mhm.
reliable. Only Israeli information. So it's very difficult. But I mean, they see themselves as I mean, they call themselves MENA Watch, but in fact, I mean, they don't hide it that they are basically a propaganda tool of
Yeah.
Israel.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's very difficult to discuss with him. But a similar situation, and just today, that because we're recording it now, it's the story that Israel brought out at the beginning of January, with that thousands of UNRWA members are
Mm.
terrorists, and only
Totally debunked. Totally debunked. Yeah.
totally debunked. And it came, and um, that was an attempt to overshadow another story, because Israel published this story the day after the ICJ in Den Haag decided to initiate procedures against Israel, and immediately afterwards, to get that off the news, they said, "Oh, UNRWA, they're all." I mean, at one point, some media outlets said that um, 50% or the over 50% of UNRWA members know or have a terrorist in their family. Um, I mean, I know this argument from Northern Ireland as well, with the Republican movement. Yes, in Northern Ireland, if you look at it like that, and if you say that the whole Republican movement are terrorists, then also two-thirds of
Mm.
the Irish Catholics in Northern Ireland have a terrorist in their family. But because Israel declares all these organizations as terrorists. And now today, the UN report, the UN investigation was published, and it made clear this is all wrong. This was all lies by Israel about the links uh, of UNRWA members assisting the October 7 attack and all these things. But that is only, um, and again, I watched the news, and in Germany and Austria, it was a side story. But in
But
January, when Israel came out with it, it was big. It was big. It was the main news in all news programs, but that these were all lies is a side story.
yeah,
That's not.
but it had a massive impact because several countries stopped
Yeah,
funding. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Still,
on the ground,
yeah, yeah,
massive impact.
yeah. Still, Austria and Germany. I don't know the situation in the Netherlands, but still, Germany and Austria are not paying for UNRWA up until now.
One last thing about this interview with the ORF. Yeah. Alex Gruber also referenced to the actual October 7, 1200. I don't know how many dead, yeah. But he completely neglected to state that we know today that, I don't know, different numbers. Up to half of the casualties of that specific day were actually killed by the Israelis themselves, and we know that not because we are, fishing this conspiracy. We know that from Israeli sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the videos from the helicopter. We have the videos from the tanks who shoot in the kibbutz. Israeli tanks shooting in the kibbutz. We have videos from this festival. Yeah, where
Mm.
there were fighters. Yeah, where the people were in the crossfire. Yeah? By the way, US Ambassador Charles Friedman, who I interviewed, said it a festival next to hell. That's how he called this festival, next to Gaza, right? So again, the representation, the omission of facts, the misrepresentation, yeah, on a public stage, yeah, is all pervasive. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's very dangerous because we are going in the wrong direction. It doesn't matter if it's Ukraine, yeah, and I don't like to mix topics, yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's in regards to Ukraine or the conflict in the Middle East. Now that we have Iran coming in, yeah, and other big interests, this people do not realize we are balancing on the abyss, yeah, and we are still dancing, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Uh, just briefly to add on that, uh, I also don't want to mix topics, but regarding the media reporting and the media bias, there are strong similarities between the situation in Ukraine and Palestine, because and the reason why I mentioned this one question at the press conference, that are you an anti-Semite, at the press conference to the organizers, also because it's completely nonsense. I mean, he's a Jewish activist himself, but this is against any journalistic standards and any journalistic ethics. But um, I see it more and more, and it also since the war in Ukraine, that it doesn't matter if you're sticking to ethical standards, journalistic standards,
Hmm.
or if you're a good journalist or not. What depends is that you are on the right side.
Hmm. And the Ukrainian equivalent to that statement is Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, right? And everyone
Yeah,
with a grain of understanding knows, inclusive the current CIA director William Burns, who was
yeah,
U.S. ambassador in Russia. He wrote it in his memoir, which I have behind it. Yeah, NATO expansion is the reddest of red lines, not only for Putin but for his complete elite. Yeah, so they knew what they were doing. Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, let's not mix. Let's go back to Palestine. There's one more topic I would like to bring up, and that's your book, Terror.
Mm.
And if we can, let's keep it under the umbrella of the Israel-Palestine conflict. So, what conclusions can you offer us from your book in regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Um, maybe I should start with why I wrote this book. So the book is called Terror: History of Political Violence, and as I mentioned before, with my academic background, what I'm researching, armed organizations, this is very much the field that covers this research is called terrorism studies. Although there are other fields as well, um, social movement studies. There's a new um, discipline, critical terrorism studies. But that brought me into the larger interest in the phenomenon of terrorism. And our understanding of what is terrorism is very much shaped by the events of 11th of September and afterwards.
Yeah,
Oh,
post and pre. Yeah.
yeah, and if you go out, ask people what is terrorism. It is morally the worst thing you can imagine, and it's very often linked to a certain group of people, to a certain religion, mainly Muslims. And this understanding of the phenomenon of terrorism and political violence was very much shaped after 9/11, George Bush's war against terror, as he called it, and also our understanding understanding in public and what the media portrays as terrorism is always against us, against the West, and anti-state actors. So actors against the state. And my idea is I'm a historian of contemporary history. He works at the intersection of history and political science. And I wanted to provide in history, you would say a longue durée or a long history of the phenomenon of terrorism. So I start with the first sources, basically, the first mentions of activities, of actions that we can find that would nowadays be called terrorism. So basically, like 2,500 years ago. And when you look at this long history of terrorism, you find out that, first of all, for a long time, terrorism was actually something that political groups used for themselves. They called themselves terrorists um, to distinguish from other forms of violence, criminal forms of violence, and also to underline that they have a political objective. So, do you want to uh, improve certain things? You want it's a communication tool. It's a form of propaganda. You want to be heard. You want your demands to be heard. And but another very interesting aspect, and since 9/11 we see this introduction of terrorists all over the world, and people are put and groups are put on as terrorists. And if you're on the terror list, um, your assets, your finances are blocked. Some people can't fly, and you're the worst of the worst. Yeah, always distressing as Hamas, as the terrorist group Hamas. This is the wording of the the public stations in Germany. There is also a guideline from the ARD, the German national broadcaster, a 40-page guideline for their reporters, what terms to use in relation to the current conflict. And one directive is always say the terrorist group Hamas, to underline how bad they are. But if we look at the history of terrorism and also the currently existing forms of terrorism that we see, the data shows it, and also I'm quoting in my book Richard English, who is I would arguably the leading professor in that field, the leading researcher, is the former director of the Handa Center for the Study of Terrorism and Political Violence at University of St Andrews. He's now vice president of Queen's University Belfast, and he writes in his books that um, the vast majority of terrorism in human history is used by states. Um, and also today, and if we there's several different definitions of terrorism, but almost under the majority of the definitions include not only non-state actors or anti-state actors, but also state actors or pro-state actors. So when I talk about pro-state actors, I mean, like, for instance, counter-guerrilla organizations, as you had in Turkey or in Latin America, against pro-state paramilitary organizations that act against guerrilla organizations. And nowadays we see a large variety forms of so-called state terrorism, which is actually the dominant form of terrorism, although everyone links terrorism with anti-state and non-state actors. But also in Western Europe, in the 1980s, the shoot-to-kill policy by um, the British state in Northern Ireland, and particularly, I wrote the book 1.5 years, or was published 1.5 years ago. But I write in the book that the highest form of state terrorism is genocide. This is exactly what's happening in Gaza nowadays, and also a clear, it's textbook example. That's what students of terrorism studies learn as textbooks example is the drone warfare. The use of drones, which was accelerated under the
Obama.
Obama administration. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
sending his drones all over the world, uh, breaking international law because and killing people in Somalia, in Yemen, in Iraq, um, and also one example that a clear textbook example of state terrorism and the use of drone warfare is the actions of Israel. Israel is in particularly an interesting example in the field of terrorism because what is very often forgotten, or because it's also a bit of like hidden by Israeli state historiography nowadays, is that actually Israel is a result of a successful terror campaign of Zionist terror organizations, Irgun, and the
Lehi, Haganah.
Lehi, Haganah, and all
Yeah.
those in the 1940s. And in July 1946, a unit led by the later head of government and president of Israel, Menachem Begin, uh, bombed the King David hotel in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
killing over 90 people. That was the deadliest terror attack for several decades. And university students at the University of St. Andrews, for example, because you always have this debate: does terrorism work? Is terrorism successful? And actually, the Zionist campaign is actually a textbook example where students learn about the success of a terror campaign because it ended in the foundation of a state, the state of
Yeah.
Israel. And now Israel, throughout its history, continuing with other forms of terror, state terror against the Palestine population. And I think, as I said, the book was published before the events that occurred in the last 7 months. But this the use and the indiscriminatory use of AI
Yeah.
in uh, uh, the aggression against Gaza is also a new edition of these forms of state terrorism, and then with the Gaza war, I mean, this is a completely new level. So many new forms. Um,
This complete destruction, this live streamed, and you said it right, genocide. And again, I have a whole string of academics, experts in this field, who say this is genocide. Yeah,
yes,
Omar Bartov, I don't know, Professor Omar Bartov, I don't know if you know him, but he's one of the leading experts when it comes to genocide and Holocaust. Yeah, he says this is clearly a genocide. Yeah,
yes, yes, and also like the attacks on the hospitals, indiscriminate bombing, and just destroying everything, making Gaza unlivable, because
yeah.
that's what is doing at the moment. And as you said, they're leading experts in genocide studies. I know, for instance, Dirk Moses, because he was in Florence at the time. He's now a professor in New York. He's also a leading scholar in genocide studies.
Hmm.
And all these people say, all all criterias, all definitions of genocide. This is a clear example, and still the media
Yeah.
refu-
And politicians,
and
media and
politicians
politicians. Yeah.
refuse to use this term,
Yeah.
although all experts clearly show it.
Yeah. Yeah. Coming back to terror at the beginning of at the genesis of Israel. Yeah. The UK. I mean, because it's not something you or me. We say Israel is a terror state. Or yeah. It was the precursor of the CIA and the MI6. They called Irgun, Lehi, Haganah, Stern Gang. They called them in official declassified documents. They called them terror gangs. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I have a little list. I just interviewed Haim Rashid, Professor Haim Rashid. So in preparation of his interview, I had a couple of notes. Yeah, so not do you think those terror groups? They're some obscure little groups. Yeah, so Menachem Begin was associated with the Irgun, and the Irgun had the attack on the King David Hotel. Yeah,
Hmm.
Yitzhak Shamir was one of the Stern gang. Yeah, they assassinated the British minister Lord Moyen and the UN meditator Count Volker Bernadotte. Now, in the case of Count Volker Bernadotte, you have to understand that this person rescued more than 30,000 Jews from the Nazis, and yet they killed him. Yeah. Then with Agana, we have Ben Gurion, of course, Moshe Sharet, yeah, Golda Meir, and Yitzhak Rabin. They were closely linked to those terror groups, and all of the names I just mentioned became Israel's prime ministers. Yeah. So again, I often say in my interviews, Israel is a virtual child of terror, and you cannot see it as at another way. And one last point I would like to make: I came a couple of months ago in November. I came back from Jordan. I interviewed a second survivor of the massacre of Tantura. I interviewed one in Germany, and it was a man, and the old lady in Amman. Yeah, the stories that they told me is just unbelievable. Yeah, and it's interesting because they're men and women, because the Israelis did different things to men and women. Yeah, so I have the story from both angles. So again, this red thread of terror, state terror, this is where I want to go with this, goes through the history of Israel. Yeah.
Yes, 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 it does, and you see it in every decade, in every conflict. Other forms of state terror emerge. Um, Also, what the Israeli army, what they did in Lebanon during
Sabra and Shatila. Yeah.
Sabra and Shatila, and then the secret prisons, Khiam in the south, torturing men and women to death, um, and so it goes through like yeah, a red line of the history
Mm.
of this state. And the interesting point is that many other terrorist groups learn from Israel. Menachem Begin, he wrote about his time in urban warfare the in his group conducting this terrorist campaign. He wrote a book about this time, and very interestingly, when a British, sorry, an American unit were raiding the cave where Osama bin Laden was hiding in Tora Bora in East Afghanistan. Um, they found the library, and in the library there was Menachem Begin's book with comments and notes from Osama bin Laden about how to conduct a terror campaign.
Mm.
Um, so I think this is a yeah I think I always find this an interesting story how uh, Israeli terrorism informed jihadi terrorism.
Yeah. And maybe one last point that we could cover. Yeah? So many people say we should stop selling arms to Israel. Now, my argument is the opposite. We should stop buying arms from Israel, because there are and again, I just had a couple of interesting interviews on this topic. Yeah, about 140 to 150 of the 193 countries that we have in the world are currently purchasing this so-called battle-tested weaponry, and I'm not only talking about hardware, software, AI, yeah, underneath, yeah, around the world for other regimes which are, which have genocidal intentions.
Mhm. Yes, 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 very, very much so. I think this is very dangerous. In particularly, um, I don't know if you're aware. I recently read an article of these r- robot dogs that Israel
Yes,
is using in Gaza,
yes,
um,
yes, yes,
and how dangerous it is. I mean, the, we've seen it also with software development, hacker software. I mean, the whole Pegasus software that was all developed by
Israeli,
Israeli
yeah,
companies.
yeah,
And yes, and I think that Gaza is a very, very dangerous test run also for future armed conflicts, where they
yeah,
are going. And
yeah,
um, also because uh, any regulations and any ethics of warfare are thrown out at the
it's gone,
moment.
it's
It
gone,
started already in Ukraine, I guess, for
yeah,
different reasons. I mean, in Ukraine, the US, they exported all their ammunition that they couldn't, the cluster ammunition and everything they had in their stock but couldn't use themselves because they are prohibited. They sold to the Ukrainians to use it. Uh, but that was already a very worrying watering down uh, of ethics of warfare that were set up after the Second World War with the
mm.
Geneva Convention, other conventions, and through the UN. And now again, this is accelerating in Gaza, and it's leading into a very, very yeah, it's very dangerous, leading into a very, very worrying direction.
It creates precedences, right, that other regimes will use. And to those who say, well, this is in Gaza, that's far away, that's the Middle East, I'm not really concerned here. Now there is a trend, a global trend. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's India or the US or even here in Europe. I mean, here in the Netherlands, we have a right wing. They elected a right wing government. Yeah, right wing populism, militarization of the police to suppress, the population. There are left and right studies, and I believe, did I see one with you? I think there was an interview with Pascal Lotas,
Pascal
and
Lotus, yeah.
yes, yes, and great channel, by the way, great channel. I have a loose cooperation with Lothar, where there were some researchers who investigated the gap between what's actually broadcasted officially in media and the actual sentiment, the public sentiment on social media like Twitter, YouTube, etc., etc. Yeah, and there's a massive gap. Yeah, and
Yes.
this gap, the governments will try to breach this gap with the only tool they have left, and that's violence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying what happens now in Gaza, and I'm talking too much now, yeah. But Anthony Löwenstein wrote a book called The Palestine Laboratory, where he
Mhm.
addresses exactly that. Yeah. So these weapons, first you will recognize them on the street like funny toys or whatever, yeah. But the sinister background here is this is being produced and sold on a mass basis to keep the populations under control. Populations were more and more ruled by autocratic or semi-autocratic regimes. Yeah, and that's our future. Even here in the West, this is
Yeah.
our future. Yeah,
Yeah.
you and to a lesser degree I are still young enough to witness this.
Yes.
That's my dark prediction.
No, but I think you are completely right, and it's a very worrying development. And that brings us back at the beginning of our conversation. The way they not only the German police behaved, but also the way they stretch the legal framework with all these things like this is a demonstration within a private venue and things like that. How stretching legal norms, and then Nancy Faeser, Interior Minister, says that was all correct, excellent, well done. These are very worrying developments, um, and just as we talk today, the Austrian army, the Bundesheer, they are conducting a 4-day long training in counter insurgency, and as we speak, together with the Austrian intelligence service, and they are training how to suppress an anarchist rebellion in Austria. I mean, uh, Austria. I mean, an anarchist rebellion is a bit. I mean, uh,
It's population control. It's population control.
but it
That's what
is
they're preparing
population.
for.
That's what they're
Yeah.
preparing for, exactly, and it
Yeah.
goes into very worrying development. And the international developments, they are used to militarize European states. Austria has just ordered 250 new Pandur tanks. They will have almost 400. I was there as a journalist reporting about the signing of these new Pandur tanks. The Austrian the Austrian army will have 400 of them, but Austria has 1,000 soldiers trained for international for international emergencies or UN emergencies. So 1,000 soldiers, but there are 400 tanks. So one journalist asked, "Why do you need 400 tanks for 1,000 soldiers who are stationed in around the world?" And the answer of the Austrian Defense Minister Tanner was, "They're also for use within Austria." She didn't want to go into detail what she means with that, but she said also for use within the country. So as you said, it is training, is preparing for population control.
Yeah. And this is coming. On that note, Dieter, is there any other topic that you would like to bring up? Anything, maybe, I don't know, anything that we didn't cover in the context of our discussion?
I think we already covered a lot, and also
Quite some. Yeah.
deviated
Yeah.
here and
Yeah.
there from the
Yeah.
actual topic of
Yeah.
the war in Gaza and the Palestine conference. And I think I let's also give the our viewers and listeners a bit of a break
Yeah.
after this long time,
Good.
and not
Good.
continue with something else.
Okay. Dieter, it was my pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time.
I say thank you.
I will definitely try to stay in contact with you. Okay. I will follow your progress. I will follow your progress with interest.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting conversation. Bye. Wonderful.